Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Dumelang, Bomen, Mondale. We're sorry we're late. We just came from the awards ceremony of Rise in the City, which was the architecture competition we've been running. And so thank you very much for your patience and for waiting for us. It gives me great pleasure today. We've got three incredible guests with us today. We're super lucky. And they've flown in specially, and then they're literally flying out immediately after this. So we've got to make the most of this hour that we have together, and we want to make the session as interactive and as interesting as possible. So with us today, we have Nadia Mphethi Morojele, who's our own Lesotho architect based out of Johannesburg with MMA Design Studio. Welcome, Mr. Mphethi. And we have Nadia Tromp, who is heads in Sika Architects in Johannesburg and is also the president of the Gauteng Institute for Architecture. Welcome, Nadia. And we also have Sam Oghale, who's the principal architect and vice president of AOCOM Canada Architect Limited in Canada, and he's also was the president of the Royal Architecture Institute of Canada in 2015. And lots of other things, but I won't waste time on their bios. You can look them up on our website. So Sam, Nadia, and Mphethi were three of our judges on the panel of Rise in the City, which was the architecture competition for affordable housing. So we're incredibly lucky. Sam is flying at the moment. He's doing 10 countries in 10 days in Africa, and he's come all the way from Canada. So really thank you so much for being here. And this is your first and Nadia's first time of hopefully more trips to Lesotho, so welcome. And today's subject is sustainable goal number? Anyone? 11, yes, indeed. Which is make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. How many sustainable goals are there? Anyone know? Okay, there's 17 altogether. So this is a key subject, and what I'd like to do is perhaps ask Nadia to give us some overview, maybe a little bit about the goal from a general perspective and about the stewardship of it, to give us some kind of context. But as I said, we really want this to be interactive, so do please raise your hand. We'll leave some time for Q&A, but even during the discussion, if there's a burning topic you want to ask, please go ahead and do so. We want to make this as informal and fun as possible. So I will hand over to Nadia to give us a sort of a bit of an intro into the subject.
So my name is Nadia Tromp. I'm the president of GIPA, that's the Gauteng Institute for Architecture in Johannesburg. I'm also the director of a work program for the UIA, which deals with community architecture and human rights. So this work program deals directly with the Sustainable Goal 11, which looks at sustainable and resilient cities. I have some images that will be coming up shortly, but if I can just talk a little bit about the work that we're doing as a work group. Africa is the part of Region 5. There are 5 regions that make up the UIA, and within this work group we have participants from all 5 regions. And within the Sustainable Goal Developments 2030, there are a number of goals that we're trying to achieve in terms of educating people about the sustainable goals. So sustainable cities is something which is very important to us as Africans and coming from an African perspective. With the rapid urbanization, you find that spatial planning is often left behind, and you fall into problems of traffic, overcrowding, and often it becomes an afterthought. And so what we're trying to do is to look at how we can start playing a more important role with cities and government in infrastructure in terms of understanding what work they're doing and how they are incorporating the sustainable goals into their development. So if you look at Johannesburg, for example, we've got a spatial development framework 2014, and that looked at how we could bring outlying areas, and this is very particular to the South African context, where we had apartheid planning before, and many communities were then pushed out to the outskirts of cities and really pulled very far away from any economic opportunity. So now what the city has done is they've taken a very conscious decision to try and change this. And we, being in Joburg, we're actually quite lucky, I think, because it's been taken up very strongly by both the private and the public sector. So these are just a few images. If you look at cities around the world, this is a picture of Lagos, and you can see that the formal city is kind of happening at the back, and in front you have the informal city, which is happening down here. And so this is not a unique occurrence in African cities. You find it all over. You find it like in Nairobi, in Kenya, and you also find it in Johannesburg, which is very developed. So our urban planners and urban strategists actually have a very important role in shaping the way our cities will grow in future, with the goal of sustainability in mind. And when one thinks about sustainability, it's not only looking at the sustainability of buildings, so how you build a green building, but you're actually looking even deeper than that in terms of how do we make communities sustainable? How do we make developments within communities? How do we make those communities take ownership of them and really start to engage with the process in a much more meaningful way? Okay, these are just some more pictures. And this is the Joburg phenomenon. And then I want to flip to the global south. If we look at Sao Paulo, this is, it's a very stark indication of how growth hasn't been directed in a sustainable manner. So you see that the favelas are right up against the formal city as it is. Not very different to what we have here in Africa. So it's really interesting. In South Africa, we're still trying to see how we can remove informal settlements and rebuild it. Whereas in Brazil, they've taken a very different stance. They've now accepted that that is what it is, and they've started encouraging and kind of giving people access to build better, safer spaces where they are. So this is really, you can see that edge is just divided by a wall. You have the extreme rich on the one side and the very poor on the other side. So what we've looked at is to say maybe we can think about it in a much more holistic way. Previously, in terms of the UNESCO goals and the URA goals, we were able to monitor and reach monitor the growth within the goal quite easily because it was really focused on the global south and developing countries. So that previously looked at how do we change the condition for the majority of the people in developing countries and try and cut out hunger and thereby lead to education and giving people an opportunity to education, with dealing with the most basic requirements, which is hunger and shelter. So we've looked at looking at basic human needs because we found that with these sustainable goals, you can't just measure it on the GDP of a country to say if we change the economic growth within that country, you should see the development in meeting the sustainable goals as well. So it becomes much more complex. And this is a matrix which looks at a number of different things that could measure how one can re-look at it and evaluate how the country is doing in terms of sustainable goals. So the basic human needs like nutrition and basic medical care, water and sanitation, shelter and personal safety. All of the countries that have committed to the Sustainable Development Goals are now measured on the Sustainable Goals with this as a toolkit to measure how they're doing. Then the foundations of well-being, which is access to basic knowledge. So this was previously looked at in a much more narrowed way, but it also comes through into the Sustainable Development Goals as well, because it influences the way communities grow and thrive. Access to information and communication, health and wellness, and then environmental quality. And then the last matrix is looking at personal rights. So, for example, in South Africa, we're doing really well in terms of personal rights and personal freedom, freedom of speech, but in other areas we're still lacking, like basic medical care. So a few years ago, the city of Joburg decided to roll out quite a number of clinics around the city, and they made it mandatory that any community within a 5-kilometer radius, a person should be able to walk to a clinic. And that makes a huge difference to the people's livelihood, because you find that within outlying areas, most people walk to where they need to go. And previously clinics were very far away, kilometers away. So for the local government to get involved and start putting in these kind of strategic measures really starts changing the way communities work and thrive. And then I just want to leave this image on the screen as the last image, and maybe we can keep it up during our discussion. And it's just really talking to the idea of how cities develop and how our future cities may look. And to also look at the idea of how even the way we teach in our universities is being decolonized, and the students are getting the opportunity to really bring their learning and their own culture into the studio. And so I'd like to just end on this image.
I'm sure a lot of people here cannot imagine what it is. 0 degrees is the freezing point of water. And just imagine if you're living in minus 22 degrees. The whole sustainable development goals are actually very intrinsic to how our cities survive. So the aspect that I kind of want to talk about without going into the technicality is to look at how do we nudge good behaviors in our cities. Chances are that every city, first and foremost, we have to look at architecture as an abstraction of societal values. Being in a city like Maseru, you are a reflection of the collective mindset on how you solve problems. And one way to solve a lot of problems is using design as a tool. If I have to summarize everything about the SDG 11, it's about how we use design to solve human problems. Virtually every problem in the city can be solved. If you have any problem that is still existing in your city, the likely answer is because the appropriate design has not been found to address the situation. And now, what do I mean by design? By design, I'm not necessarily focusing on architectural design, your blueprint and all that. I'm looking at design as that very deliberate approach to resolve and address issues. And that is what, so whether it's how you design the policies in the cities or how you come up with solutions. So just to give you a few examples, I am a student of nudging. I don't know, how many people here have actually read the book called Nudge by Substance Taylor? Have you heard? Do you know what nudging is? Do you understand the meaning of nudging? So nudging is just something very simple. Nudging is just the simple process of steering people in the right direction. And when I come in here and I nudge you, right? The way we get nudged, right, is not necessarily something that you have control over, but you react and respond to it. So I believe that nudging is actually one of those things that can bring about the sustainable development goals, right? The whole idea of having the criteria for evaluation and all that, I see that as part of nudging. So to give you a few examples where nudging can actually be very interesting as a design. In Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, because of the standard that the airport sets, of cleanliness, making sure that everything is quite clean, they had a problem in the male washroom. And the problem they keep having in the male washroom is the problem of overspraying in the urinals. So you go into the toilet because of the cleaning standard that they chose to have. That means that every time people go into the washroom to use the washroom and the urinals, You see pee, right, being sprayed all over the place. And that means that the airport has to provide additional janitors to clean more often than not, and that results into more cost. So ideally, if you have a budget to actually clean the airport, maybe twice a day or 3 times a day, you're seeing yourself having to pay people over time to clean that particular space over a number of times, 5 times or thereabout. So that's a problem, and the usual solution is, oh, that's the way it is, men, right? There's nothing you can do about it. And that was one approach. It's not any different from the approach we have in our cities, just like the pictures that Nadia showed about the congestion that you have. The usual approach is, oh, that's the way it is. Oh, Lagos, that's the way it is. However, a nudge experiment was performed in Schiphol. And one of the nudge experiments, that was performed was, just something that was very unlikely. It involved the use of an artist. They got an artist, etched a housefly in the urinal. Housefly, the housefly looked very real. And whenever people come to use the washroom, and because men love to aim, they aim and it solved the problem of overspraying. So, the lesson from there is, that means that they didn't have to hire more people to clean, over and over time. Is that a likely solution that will come from an architectural studio or an architectural design? Probably not. The point is, you can nudge some of the solutions, that will make us achieve the sustainable development goals. Another example I can probably give to you is, the whole behavioral approach and attitude. There was a shopping, a departmental store in the United States that was actually very conscious about healthy living. The whole healthy living is actually something that is very important. So people go to the grocery stores. In the grocery stores, all they do is, actually, let me step back. One thing that is very glaring about human beings, right? Based on research that has been done, when human beings are given choices and options, we always tend to gravitate towards the wrong choices. It doesn't matter what you do. Pick healthy food, eat your celeries, your fruits, vegetables and all that, and put McDonald's hamburger and all the hearts, clogging, food. People gravitate towards that. How do we know that? We see the numbers, we can tell where the money is going to, how people spend money. So this particular shopping mall wanted to actually change the behavior of people to imbibe, the attitude of well-being and good living. So when you have your shopping cart, you get in there, all they did was just to put a demarcation. Fresh fruits here in the front and every other thing, at the back. What they saw was quite interesting. Everyone, after going through their shopping, people fill their carts with all sorts of things. And they noticed that they're usually very shy and ashamed when they see the area that was dedicated for fruits and veg and vegetable is empty. People tend to go back, right? And fill those things and replace things. Now, that sign that they had in that shopping cart was a nudge that changed, people's behavior. That nudge, changed just slightly, changed, the behavior, of people. So there are actually a lot of examples that you can give, right, to do that. Now, why am I concentrating on nudge? A lot of the ideas that will actually solve most of the sustainable development goals, things like, technical, competence of the solution that we create, creativity, whole of life performance, and virtually having sustainable and resilient buildings has to be nudged. It won't happen without us actually coming with solutions. So the challenge I'm leaving with every one of you is, what kind of nudge can you come with to actually solve everyday problem that you do have? That's one aspect of it. And the last example I'm going to give in terms of that is related to the sustainable development goal was a nudge experiment that was done by the British government. The British government actually had the behavioral insights team, which was set up by Cameron's administration in Britain. And one of the things they wanted to do was to make sure that buildings are properly insulated so that you can save energy. And that's really very important, to make sure that our cities can function very well. The amount of energy that we waste in cities, right, is alarming. That at the rate that it is, if we don't do anything about it, it will become very unsustainable. So the British government, decided that, they're going to provide grants, to people to insulate the Arctic, space. This was a program that was previously done by the Swedish government, and it was actually quite successful. But they noticed that even though they did put, I think it was about 60 million pounds or whatever the amount of money was, people did not gravitate towards it. Look, you have 60,000, pounds, as a grant for you to actually insulate your Arctic and all that. But people did not gravitate towards that. And what was the problem? They had to go back to the drawing table, and they realized that in the UK, the Arctic is actually where people store things. And there's nothing that you will do that will make them want to actually go, start, clearing things out. So there was no incentive. It doesn't matter how much you give to me, I'm not doing that. So what the British government did was to get the behavioral insight team to look at what kind of nudge can we actually put in there. So with the grants came with the promise that, there's a company that will actually help you clear the Arctic, you do the installation, and then the Arctic will be placed back, the way it was. And immediately there was actually a lot of uptake in it, and they were able to have a very successful, installation program, and the Arctics, were done. So there are all those kind of examples, and I'll leave you guys with, the thought that you need to come up with different types of nudges to help us achieve the sustainable development goals and to create a better future for your generation, our generation, and future generation. Thank you.
Research, understand the problems, and either nudge or plan solutions. So I used to teach on Mphethi a couple of years ago. And we used to take bus, public transport, with coming all the way up in Gawat. I think it was Kokopshe, some army bus. And it used to pick people up all the way, circling down for Tewa, and then it goes to industrial area. And that was the main public transport that was running through the city. After school, I would go back home and go and play soccer in the local field, Dynamos. If you fast forward to 10, 15 years later, it used to take me about 30 minutes from Mphethi to come here. Right now it will take you how long? From Oghale to town, it takes how long? In the morning. An hour. For a distance of 5 kilometers. Now why is that? What is the reasons? Obviously the more time you spend on the roads, the less time you have to be productive. It's a question of bad planning. Simply put, we did not plan properly for the future. That's one example. And I'm sure even with you guys, there's a lot of examples of bad planning that you can talk about. And some of the kind of social and cultural impacts of bad planning. So, for example, if you look at the rates of alcoholism in Lesotho, it's because people don't have facilities to deal with other things like sports, recreation. There are no public spaces, public parks. So our only public activity is to go to the Taga or the Shibif. Why? Again, it's a question of bad planning. I think Maseru is one of the few cities in the world that doesn't have an actual spatial development plan. And I know there are plans now underway to try and address that issue, but basically there was no plan. You would just go and get a site to build your house, and eventually a road might come past there. But there was no planning that happened in this town. And you can see the results of the lack of planning. Things like waste. Waste is a big problem because we don't have proper waste collection systems, because we haven't planned our towns in a way that they can be organized, that the truck can go down the main road and pick up all the rubbish. So I think, and this is an open conversation, I think, with you guys. What can we diagnose what the problems are in Maseru according to the goals that have been put up on the table? I just gave a few examples, but it would be interesting to hear from yourselves as well. I think another very important issue is how well-planned cities actually create economic opportunities and jobs. Because if people live close enough to each other, already the money starts circulating. One will buy this, one will sell that, one will buy. And you find that economically developed just through well-planned cities. So yeah, those are just a few examples, but maybe Daniel, it would be interesting to hear from the students how they would diagnose some of these formats.
Thanks very much. Some very provocative thoughts and questions there. And if no one's got any hands going up, I've got lots of follow-up questions. Yes, can you speak really loudly or come down here to talk through the mic? Okay, can you stand up so everyone can hear?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. The question is, I've been quite listening to what all the speakers have said, but I think I got a few questions.
Not loud enough, sorry.
It's okay. So the question is, since you as an organization, you are a university. Okay. Maybe, I don't know how long you've been in this country, or I don't know, several times you pay a visit, but what have you at least achieved, or what have you realized? Okay, you have told us the problems, yeah, that's good, but then is there any strategy or anything you can point as an organization? Okay, these are our landmarks, so we've done this and that, so obviously, so we can know this, that whatever you're doing, you're gonna make a follow-up. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. So yeah, any good examples or best practices or things that you've seen from other cities around?
Thank you for that question. So maybe I'm going to start with a bad example. Because, you know, architecture is, you always see the good in it, but it's good to recognize the bad in it as well. So when we talk about cities and urban development, there are a few places that are very overpopulated, like China and India. And within China and India, you see mega cities being sprung all over. And what they've learned, or what we can learn from what has happened there, is that the model that was followed initially is not necessarily the correct model. So initially they focused only on urbanization, bringing people into the city so that they're closer to opportunities. But the building typology was only residential. So there was no mixed use, there was no opportunity for retail, there was no opportunity for social intervention. And so I would point to that as a good way to look at what not to do and to learn from those examples. And then it's my first time here. I just arrived this morning. But what I've picked up and noticed, and I think it's a good thing, is that because the city is, if I talk about Maseru and just looking at the outlying areas, it seems quite sparse. But with that said, you don't have the very physical barriers like we have in South Africa. For example, with the apartheid planning, areas were separated by huge highways, 6 lanes of highways. So in that way, they kept the economic divide, even till today, that still hasn't been abridged. So you have areas that are very, very wealthy, and you have very, very poor people just on the other side, but they have this very physical barrier that they can't cross. So I think that's maybe a positive for Maseru, where you don't have those, stark divisions, and there's not an opportunity to plan from this point.
Yes, I would agree with you. I think that's true. Maseru is quite an inclusive city. Wherever you come from, you find that people have accessibility to land. Even right in the inner cities, areas like Usiko and stuff, you still find people of low income being able to live in the city. So like Nadia says, that is a positive thing to start off from.
I've got a question there. Okay.
He mentioned the problems that we actually had. One of the problems that we actually have in the country is that even though sometimes we are able to plan, implementing the plan as it is quite a problem. So we need like bodies that can actually oversee the plan that is executed properly.
Yeah, good point. And following on from that, to take the opportunity, because I like to be provocative, and we've got a unique opportunity here in the room by having people from academia, people from the private practicing architecture sector, people from government, to ask who's let's face it, we're in this challenging, problematic situation, right? This is the situation we're at. Whose responsibility is it to come up with the solutions, and maybe what is the role of participatory sort of design and processes? And have you seen any good examples of that maybe can be a good glimpse of hope for the young upcoming architects? How many architects do we have in the room? How many of you are studying architecture right now? Okay, a number of you, majority of you. Engineering? Okay, a couple of you. Anything else? What other subjects? We've got a number of lecturers here as well. Anyway, so lots of ears open to good examples or any... would like to take that?
Well, I think this is a question that you always see in every community in terms of what needs to be done to solve problem or how to address issues. One aspect of looking at it is the aspect of engagement. Being engaged enough, right, to deal with issues is always the starting point. Whatever problem that you have in the city or whatever problem you have right within the campus, it goes a long way to show how much do you tolerate or how much are you upset about the situation to want to actually create a change. It's often said that the problem, most times when you see all those challenges around, most times you hear people say, it's because we don't have the resources, we don't have the money, there's no budget, or there's no time, or there's all sorts of things that are usually the obstacles to why situations exist. But the actual fact there is, the problem we have is not necessarily that of resources to address the issue. Most times it's actually the problem of resourcefulness. If you're resourceful enough, every problem, whether it's the traffic problem or the congestion or the bad planning that has occurred over the past, it lies in the hands of the current players to be engaged enough to come up with solutions to address it. And part of being engaged is coming up with solutions and dealing with local solutions, whether it's how the societies or the communities are organized, or whether it's how you're all organized, or whatever it is, the solution has to be grassroots, the solution has to be from yourselves, right, to kind of address it. The temptation is always to expect that people from outside will actually create the solution. It has never worked anywhere in the world. It will never work anywhere in the world. You have to actually come up with a solution, to the problems that you have. But what the work also is to carry out case studies and benchmarking to see how similar problems have been solved in other communities around the world, and not to repeat the mistakes that others have done. But history is always a very good teacher in that respect, that sometimes as human beings we don't learn. So Lesotho and Maseru being where it is and not having some of the legacy issues and some of the challenges that other cities have, I think you are sitting in a very good place to show an example to the rest of the world on how to address certain things from the grassroots locally and get engaged and keep growing and keep making it better. So I thought I should just address it from that very general point of view, and we can get into very specifics.
Thanks. I'd like to just take from what Sam was saying, it kind of sparked a memory with regards to how IDEO, I don't know if you guys know IDEO, but the way they deal with problems and problem solving. So they teach a method of design thinking. And basically what this is looking at the most basic problem that you may have. If I could maybe give an example, this bottle for running may not be the most economical. If you want to run, it's not so easy to hold it in your hand. So they say that's the problem statement to start with. And then you just start thinking about various ideas of how you could change the way you would design the bottle so that it could work for you. So you start with you first almost as the test. You test ideas quickly. You do a prototype, you do it in paper, maybe you fold some paper in a different shape with a strap, for example, or you go through various iterations of it. And you don't become too attached to your idea. You must remain open to the idea that maybe the first idea is not the right idea or not the best solution. So just to put that out there, I've found that a very useful way of dealing with problems and getting to a solution that is not always the obvious solution.
Okay, I like the comment about implementation, because it's true that no matter what good plans you have, if you don't have the mechanism to implement them, they're not very useful. And I think part of the attitude change that we have to make as a society is that previously the city was a place where you go to work and then you go back home to your rural area, wherever it is. So we never had a sense of owning the city. We just came and put your head down and go to work. But your real home is not the city, it's somewhere else. But that is changing now, especially for your generation. The city is your permanent home. That's a big change in mentality, because it means now you need to own the city and you need to jealously guard what is good about it, and you need to jealously fight against what is bad about it. So in my case, when I found that where we used to play football was taking China to build something, and it was just gone. We have no more soccer pitches. Had I felt that this belongs to our community, we would have maybe organized ourselves to say this is ours. Why taking it away? But because we feel we are not in control of our environment, because we don't own it, then it means we lack that ability to do the nudging that you're talking about, or to do advocacy, to go in and agitate for better things in ourselves. If you find there's a nice area where you used to walk with your girlfriend along the river, and now all of a sudden somebody has come into something there that doesn't work with that environment. We need to agitate, because this is now our home. We're no more visitors.
Thank you. Can you hear? The battery's running low. So very encouraging and optimistic viewpoints there about starting from grassroots and ideas from IDEO about coming up with personal solutions. So that's a different kind of angle to what we normally sort of take, where, it's government's job to fix this problem. So it actually can start from within. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to ask, just to continue on the basis of maybe problem solving from grassroots level. I had an idea, or rather a concept, where maybe the government would integrate with the people of the villages and towns and cities to try and find a solution to fix the problem that they're going through. Because, like the Morojele had mentioned, probably the problem of getting government officials to fix what is going on on the ground may not be sufficient or sustainable, because they're not dealing with that program. Would you have maybe from your experiences where other countries they found ideas on ways the community and the government, people of the South can find a correlation or consider on ways we can fix the problems that are, especially in social enterprise and finding spaces where we can socialize instead of going for the machines. Thank you.
You know, we laugh, but I think it's a really important question that you're asking. And I can only talk from my own experience. I think it has a lot to do with policy. You need to have local government supporting policy, and sometimes that means nudging, or that means actually going out there and fighting for it, right? So we're lucky in Johannesburg where we do have a policy in place with our local government where any project that has a social impact, so any public project, you need to have at least 30% local community involved in that project. Now, usually what that does is you find big contractors, if it's a large project, will get the contract, and then they would engage with smaller companies within the communities. What we've done as a practice, and this is just our own method of working, is we actually engage with the community from the beginning. So right at the inception of the project, we start engaging with those communities, and we start to find out what their needs are and what they want. And this is a slightly different approach to the way many people have worked. The reason I'm mentioning this is because we've managed to build very successful projects like this. We've won international awards doing projects this way. And what it means is that communities really start taking ownership of their projects. Because it's not just about engaging them with them in the beginning. It's not like the contractor using companies just for that project and then they leave. It's actually an ongoing process with communities from the beginning all the way through the process of building and then the end product. So if I can just make an example, we built a project in a very rough neighborhood in Joburg. And there were some riots that were happening. They were burning tires right in front of the building. They went into the building, but not a single window was broken because it's theirs and they see the value in it. So I think it starts with policy first. But for us as professionals, there's so much that you can do, that you actually have so much power to influence and to kind of encourage communities to see that this can be theirs and that they can take ownership of it.
I think that's actually a very good question you asked. It may also be addressed from the point of view of mindset. The way you framed the question, it was about, what the government, can do and all that. And my question to you is, who is the government? Who is the government? The government, I will, submit to you that whenever there is a problem that you are confronted with, and you use a third-party, adjective or descriptor, then that problem will persist, will never be solved. It's very common in Africa when we go through any problem or any issue, we always tend to say the government has not done this, the government has not done that. And you're forgetting that the government or the officials are actually your cousins, your brothers, they are part of you. But yet you distance yourself from the issue. You've not taken ownership of the issue is someone else's. And I think the solution has to start from changing that paradigm, right? From who is the government? If you have any problem or any issue that needs to be addressed, what you do or what you do not do will determine the outcome of that issue. I don't know if you understand what I mean. So it's also okay for you to say, I'm not going to do anything, it's none of my business, I'm not the principal secretary, I'm not the minister or whatever. You're living with a problem. For you not to do anything, or even if it's just to write, a letter to say, hey, I think it's, you need to come up with a policy to do this, or gather, a few people, right, around to say, hey, this is our ideas, we think we need to actually solve it. You need to solve certain problems, right, within the grassroots, and that is how it has worked successfully around the world. So this whole narrative about, the government and all that, I do agree the government has a responsibility. I'm not absolving them of the responsibility. But most times you always have to take, your lives and your problems into your hands. And, always remember what I call the 3 Ds of lives. The 3 Ds of life. First and foremost, you have to have the desire, right, which is the first thing. The desire to actually want to address an issue, to solve an issue. If the desire is not there, it doesn't matter what it is. You walk past it, you ignore it, and it will be there. You have to have that burning desire, right, to want to achieve something or change something or make it dramatic. And the next thing that I talk about is that aspect of dedication. You need to be dedicated enough to actually go research what the problem is. Dedicated to actually look at how has other society or other people have actually been able to solve this. What can we do about it? Or dedicated enough to actually mobilize people around you. Dedicated enough to actually come up with solutions. So the ideals that you talk about, you can actually see that element of dedication in terms of looking at things outside the box, and coming up with solutions. And the last D that I always tend to talk about, you always must have that discipline, right, to actually implement, what you are dedicated to, or else everything falls back. When you apply those 3 Ds to a lot of things, you start seeing incremental changes. Control what is within your sphere of influence, right? Understand what's outside your sphere of influence. Concentrate your energy, and remember that it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. So the more you curse the government is not doing this, you're criticizing and all that. What candle have you lit? If you light a candle, just one, it may not be enough to illuminate this room. But with your candle, you can actually, your neighbor can actually get their candle lit, and by the time everyone has their candle, lit, the entire space is well illuminated. And I think that's the kind of philosophical approach, that we have to start from in addressing any societal issues, that we do have. That is not their problem, it's not government's problem, it's our problem. The solution lies in us. The solution is not going to come from elsewhere. In fact, if you do it properly and you do it successfully, others from outside, CNN, Al Jazeera, SABC, just name it, they will be coming knocking on your door. To give you a lot of examples, there are projects around the world, that people have done successfully. Successfully in a way that it engaged the grassroots. People are kind of involved in it. It solves problems, and you're delighted. The community is, better and happier for it, and that's kind of shined a very good light, to that community, exposed, the community, and you build on it, and so there's a whole lot of that I think, is really very essential for us to invite and look at problem solving from that aspect of we have to solve our problem. And it's the same with your career too, right? As students of architecture, right? Not everything you're going to learn from, the school. Right now, what you're learning, you're just being given the opportunity to actually start exploring and coming up with solutions. It's just like a guy, you need to have the solution, you have to be solution oriented, right? In such a way that when you're given, even if it's a studio work or a studio assignment, look at it in depth. It starts from very simple things, accessibility. People tell you, because of the terrain of, Masero, for instance, how easy is it for people to move around with wheelchair, around? Is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible if you are dedicated to it. It's not difficult to build ramps around, right? But if the desire is not there, that will never happen, right? There's a lot of things, that can be done, that can be addressed, that way, but I'll yield to Mphethi.
I think if there's one thing I can leave with you, it's about what your training is about is how to think critically and creatively to solve problems. So you're not training to be an architect, to draw lines and build buildings, but you're actually being trained to solve problems. And sometimes those problems are solved in ways that you won't expect. Especially if you speak to people on the ground, they often have solutions to the problems. I'll give you an example. We had a project in Johannesburg, in the inner city, where we were trying to regenerate that part of the city. There was a lot of crime and grime, people didn't know how to solve some of the problems. So one of our planners came up with an idea of using crime statistics to understand the patterns of crime in that particular area. So you go to the police, you get all the crime statistics. There was assaults, there are a lot of assaults in this corner. In this corner here, there are snatching bags. Here, there are a lot of car accidents. And through that way, you can analyze and diagnose what the problems are of that city, using something like crime statistics. So in terms of research, there are ways that we need to develop, which are unique to our African context. So how do we research and diagnose what the problems are? We had another case where we were developing a market for informal traders. And we kept putting them in one place, and there's this one old lady who kept not going under the shelter, but going to where she was originally placed. And we kept asking her, why are you not in the, we've built nice shelters for you? But she kept always going back to where she was sitting on the corner. And she said, no, because I give people apples of credit, I need to see when they get off the taxi so that we can catch them and be paid with my money. Now when you put me there, I can't see them coming off the taxi, so I can't get my money. I would never have guessed in that instance that the location of this thing is wrong for a reason which I don't even understand, the local economy. She gives credit, she needs to get money back. And this is how she's arranged it. So like Nadia is saying, communication, consultation with the local community will bring up actually a lot of very interesting ideas.
Zuma Rock and the Aso Rock, where they have a very concentric, kind of, approach and have satellite cities, which was really quite exciting. But in order to do that, they needed to get rid of, some locals that were occupying, the original sites, of which are, so who are the indigenous people. Now, whether it was right or wrong, they had this great idea that the whole idea of moving them is to give them a better life. Giving them a better life, their translation of giving them a better life was built, they were living in, in sheds and mud houses, so they built 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, houses, for them. And after, about 2-3 weeks, 1 month of completion of, the new housing units that were given, those houses were empty. They moved out of it, they went to establish new slum, new sheds. And it was kind of amazing and mind-boggling that how could you, you never had toilets, right now you have toilets, you have nice bath and all that. What was really interesting about that, and this was in the 80s, we're not talking about, years and years ago, this was in the 80s and early 90s. What was interesting was the design, the architect, and the people that created the solution, just like the example, that Mphethi gave, did not, take into account, the actual need of the people. Culturally, in the society, these people live in a culture that you cannot have a toilet in the same house where you are, where it's like, you're shitting in the house, right? It's a taboo, right? As far as they're concerned. And that was the problem. They got into the house and what? They can't do that. So the solution, that came was actually an interesting solution where you are able to separate, the toilet. You still have it connected, right, to the house, open, but to have that, physical separation will have actually addressed that. And those houses, that were abandoned, did not serve the original purpose. They had to actually come back, go back to the drawing board, engage with the people. So if problems are not addressed by engaging the people and solving the problem right from scratch, it's not going to happen. So one of the lessons as architects, which we never tend to do, is to actually listen to people that people that live with it. When you design houses for people, you tend to always want to tell people how it should be. This is nice or whatever. But always remember that the amount of time that you're going to spend on that house, or the interface that you have on that house as the designer, maybe 1 year, 6 months, or whatever. But the people that are going to be in there, that will be staying there for 25 years, 30 years of their life, perhaps they have something to say, something to tell you that you should listen to.
And there is a tradition in Lesotho, right, called Letsema. Anyone practiced it? Has anyone practiced it here? Yeah? So is it still alive? No? Anyone think it's still alive and thriving? So Letsema, for those who don't know, I'm probably the worst person to explain this, so correct me, but it's where communities get together and address a certain issue and help a community member out. Yeah? And it's very, very much a sort of a tradition in Basotho culture, especially in rural areas. So this is something innate. So that's something that maybe we can revive, because community collaboration definitely is important in solving and problem solving. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Okay, I would like to ask, what's the difference between a sustainable city and a city? Because I think, for example, like when you see Johannesburg, it begins with the central market, the CBD, then you break out as in the final zone or the middle class in the suburbs. So what actually what components do make a city? Is there any difference between the city and the sustainable city?
Okay, thank you. So what makes a city sustainable? What's the difference between a sustainable city and a city?
Very, very good question. What makes a city sustainable? I'll probably use a different term, right? Within the context of resiliency. Right? Everyone will tell you that their city is sustainable. Actually, virtually everything is sustainable. It all depends on how much effort you're putting into it to make it sustainable. So it's the same conversation around affordable housing. When you say affordable housing, affordable to who? Right? That's always, the term. Same thing as sustainable, cities. Right? There are cities that are spending lots of money because they have lots of money to do it. Yes, it's sustainable to the extent to which they can do it. However, there are certain things that if you do not have to, why do you need to pay, for energy, right, on something that you can get for free, right? If it's designed properly, why do you need to address, a building? Or a city in a way, for instance, like the whole transportation system, right? In a city where you're dependent on vehicles, you're dependent on cars, where you can design it in a different way that you can create a walkable city where you can walk, where you can move around. So the whole thing about sustainability could be subjective, but it's not necessarily subjective. It's about resiliency. Now, how do we put it to test? There's increasing cases of natural disaster that is happening in different parts of the world, whether it's flooding, whether it's natural fire, or whatever it is. Being sustainable, sometimes one of the criteria also is the ability for that city to get back on its feet after going through a crisis, like a flood. So that's a good test of how you know a sustainable city. So if the part of Johannesburg that you talked about, if there is a natural disaster or there is a flood or wherever, what kind of disruption would that create? How quickly can that city get back to its original function to get going? That's one way of actually looking at it to help you define whether a city is actually sustainable or not. If you have a situation where a particular street is blocked, is closed, or there's an accident and it creates so much traffic, right, that you're there 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe you should start questioning if that is sustainable. Right? So there are different ways, without going through, the whole definition of sustainability in terms of, the social aspect, the economic aspect, right? And, the social, the economic, aspect of it. That's one way of looking at it. But look at it, in different, it's a very holistic thing. And
yeah, so just to add on to what Sam is saying, if you take it from a different point of view, I would look at the social aspect around it. So for me, you mentioned Joburg as an example. So Joburg city works well during the day. We do have issues of traffic, but at night it's a ghost town. So for me, that's not sustainable. So if I think about a sustainable city, I think about a city that could work for people during the day and at night. And to be able to accomplish that, you need mixed use of services that you provide. So you have offices that would work during the day with some retail, but maybe you have people living in the city as well, and you have some social aspects or social opportunity in the city in the evenings as well. So just from a social point of view, I think for me that's a marker as to whether a city is working well or sustainable or not.
Okay, so I like to think of sustainability around two issues. One is peak oil. When we're running out of oil, which is petrol, it means the amount of energy we have to move people and goods around is going to get less. So, can you imagine your city if there was no petrol? Would it be sustainable? Would we be able to live the way we're living? That is probably the answer is probably no. The question then is how can we design so that we can get to most places efficiently without the use of a lot of energy. At the moment in this town, if you look at the 4 ones, the amount of petrol and energy that's spent to get 4 people plus 1 around, there are much more efficient ways in which people can move around. So I think the end of petrol is going to test whether we're sustainable or not. And then the second issue is really climate change. Because climate change, as Sam says, comes with a lot of natural disasters. I think Marcelo here we've seen some flooding. Fortunately, we don't have those horrible typhoons, hurricanes, but we're getting big hailstorms which cause damage. We're getting lightning which is causing more damage. So we can see the impact of climate change even on being able to provide food for ourselves. So can we design our cities for the future in such a way that we can deal with issues of climate change? So an example in Denmark now, all the parks that they have, the public parks, they've actually built underground, almost like septic tanks with French clay. So when the city floods, those parks become like dams. They absorb all the water into the parks. They're designed like that, so the city doesn't flood anymore. So are we designing to deal with things like flooding? Are we designing to deal with being able to get food into our cities? Maybe we need to be growing food in all our gardens. So those 2 items, peak oil, climate change. If you just deal with all those things around that, I think we'll get to a definition of sustainability.
Thank you very much. And they do say time flies when you're enjoying yourself. Unfortunately, our hour is up. We've just got a couple of minutes where I'd like to give the panel the opportunity to give us a minute of your final thoughts. We've got some really ambitious targets with the sustainable goal by 2030, which is only 11 years away. We're supposedly having to ensure access for all to adequate, safe and affordable housing and basic services and upgrade slums, provide access to safe, affordable, accessible and sustainable transport systems, enhance inclusive and sustainable urbanization, all kinds of very, very ambitious targets. Seeing we've got a room full of upcoming, newly architect technicians and engineers and architects into the world, especially within the Lesotho context. Are there any parting words or anything that you'd like to leave us away with as your parting words, as your concluding words?
Okay, so for me, I think Marcelo has a lot of open space, even in the city. If you look around certain areas which either were owned by the Catholic Church or whatever, we actually have a lot of space where we can densify, unlike a lot of cities. So I think the opportunities are there for us to create much more sustainable city by densifying our cities, using all the small pockets of space, developing new types of housing typologies which are going up and are much more dense. And in that way we will increase the efficiency of the city, we will increase economic activity, and it will be a much more vibrant cultural city because we will have this kind of urban experience.
Thank you.
I would say just use your voice. If there's anything that I'd like you to take away from here is to say, you know, if you see a problem or an opportunity, I like to look at things as opportunities rather than problems and say, you know, how do we look at solving it? But make your voice heard and actually stand together to get your voice heard. And also to think about communities that don't necessarily have the agency that you have as a student at a tertiary university, to try and also maybe encourage their voices to be heard.
Well, within 11 years, I still think that there is hope, even if it's just 1 year that is left. Why? Because, first and foremost, if you change how you look at things, that thing changes. If you change the way you look at the problem changes. You start seeing differently. A lot of the things that were said, there are things that are going to be very advantageous to our communities, advantageous to ourselves. So that brings me to the point that I always love to emphasize, that the problem that we do have is not a problem of resources to address all those things. It's more about resourcefulness, and this is the crowd that we are actually leaning on to help us be more resourceful than the generation before you, right, to solve the problem. Not that we created problems for you to solve, but it's a problem that through your resourcefulness, right, we'll be able to solve. So I believe that the resourcefulness, especially what you see in this room, that lies in this room, right, can come up with, the solution. You just take it one at a time, collectively. I think the solution will be very, very glaring for everyone. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. We could go on all afternoon. I'm sure there's a lot of other questions there, but thank you so much for your time. And some 3 key takeaways that I got from this afternoon's discussion is solutions happen from within. Grassroots community collaboration is extremely important. And the individual. Secondly, let's design mixed-use cities. And thirdly, the 3Ds I think has now become 4Ds, right? Because we've got desire, dedication, discipline, and densification. So thanks so much. Please join me in thanking our panel again for their wonderful contribution. Hope you found that informative. Thank you, Sam, Nadia.